So with quite a few people dialing in, what I'm going to do is to formally welcome you to our monthly call. This is the North America and Europe call. For those of us in Asia, it's the middle of the night, so it's not
Sim,
technically.
sim.
And we are going to begin in just a moment. I'll show our antitrust policy notice first. So showing this notice, the thing that you'll see is that our full antitrust policy is available on the
Oi,
website.
Johnny,
Please feel free to check out the antitrust policy. And if you're from a Linux Foundation member company and you have any questions, you can ask our counsel, Andy Updegrove. Now, we have a pretty packed agenda as usual. We're going to go through some news items and then we're going to hand over to the work on standards, which Helio and Chris will take lead on today. Then we'll have an any other business, and then we'll close the meeting. You are very welcome to jump in with questions or comments at any time. And please remember that you are also very welcome to contribute new ideas. We like to make sure that our calls are open to people. Everyone feels welcome and everyone feels empowered to be part of what we do. Now, moving into the first item of business today, I'll be looking at our news. As I go through the news, you can always ask a question, though because of time being short, I suggest that we focus our questions and answers on the spec editing. The news around the specifications around OpenChain, well, it's extensive. A lot has been going on. We have a new Wikipedia article about what we do. Our reference library has been given a complete overhaul, and our community calendar to find events like this has been substantially improved. You can, of course, take a look at all of these things with the links that are in the slides I sent to our mailing list, and I will be sending the slides again after this call as well. We've had a lot of global events going on. So we've had, for instance, a webinar on GPL v2 licensing history. Short version, there's a lot of variants of GPL v2, 40 on the official resources alone, another 12 in the Linux kernel. We've had a very cool automation case study on technical automation, and we've had different things like our education work group meeting and talking about building the next generation of our reference material in the project. When it comes to conformance and partner announcements, a bunch of interesting things have been happening. Yes Security and Pank's project have both announced conformance to our license standard. These are two different organizations in two very different places. One is dealing with security and is based in Brazil, and another is based in Europe, if I recall correctly. We've also seen partner announcements from OSPO Taylor English, and we've seen one of our existing partners, Time to Act Group, now also offering third-party certification. In other words, adoption and support for our standards continues to grow. With other activities and events, a ton of stuff has been going on. For instance, we were invited to a very interesting event held with Alibaba in China. The Open Anolis project is basically a cloud operating system, and their standardization SIG had a brilliant meeting, which we were part of, and we learned a lot and we got a chance to highlight our work. Our German work group is focusing on translating our online courses with LF training into German, and their most recent meetings have been recorded and shared online. Our Japan work group had the first face-to-face meeting in 3 years, and naturally we recorded that and put it online as well. It was a great opportunity to meet people, eat cookies, and share stories. It's also notable that OSPO subgroup in Japan, in collaboration with To-Do Group, is holding very frequent meetups, around one every week or two. In this month already, we've had a ton of things happening. Our latest webinar was just published. It's all about FOSDEM, which is now, I believe, the largest free software and open source software event in the world. Our Export Control Work Group had their third meeting. Some great work and progress on how they're looking at existing community resources and contributing to their future. Our Germany work group, as referenced earlier, has continued to meet and discuss what they're up to around translating our licensing courses. And our telco work group has held their monthly meetings, working on their telco specification. The big item I'd like you to take away from our news is probably a data point that we have 10 third-party certifiers around the world. As always, we recommend self-certification as a great way to adopt our standards, but the availability of third-party certification is important, and having 10 around the world so far is a key example of how we're providing instructions and support for people who want it. Oh, Yari had a question. The translations into German of the training courses, is it the first one or the second one or both? The answer is both. So we're looking at translating both of the courses that LF Training offers around our license compliance standard. So that's nice. And the German work group is very active around that. SBOM news, we got some news in from SPDX. They've been doing work around their Python libraries. Their specification work for the SPDX3 continues with build licensing and AI branches. Their security and dataset profiles have to be added yet, but they're working on it. And with the new license list released last month, they have 36 new licenses or exceptions included. So basically, SPDX project is very busy preparing for SPDX 3, and it's a great time to get involved if you're interested in that aspect of software bill of materials. In OSPO news, we were sent some news from the to-do group. The open source engagement working group has announced its goals. This is the employee focused guide and work that they do. Ospology Live, which is co-organized with OpenChain, SPDX, OpenSSF, to do LF Energy, Inner Source Commons, and Chaos, is preparing for more events throughout 2023. There's a webinar coming from To-Do Group that will discuss OSPOs and transition paths in regulated environments. And the mind map that they have for describing OSPOs is now in Chinese. So the availability of resources from To-Do Group is continuing to expand. Pulling back to us, our automation work group has been doing a reboot, and this will be of interest to a lot of you. There is consensus from the automation work group that it's important to have an open source tool chain for open source compliance and security. Checking the current status of the tool chain and identifying what is needed to complete it is regarded as important. Details like data storage and data sharing schema are an interesting aspect of this to remove silos between tools. And it seems that we have agreement or forthcoming agreement that working on checking the current status of the tool chain and describing then what types of development and what funding is needed to complete it would be useful. So the proposal I put to the work group is that we start mapping the current status on the next calls. That next call will happen on the third Wednesday of March at 2 p.m. UTC. If you're interested in all of this tooling activity, please get involved via the mailing list. You can easily sign up. Everyone is very welcome to do so. Okay, it's time to hand over to our co-chairs, Chris and Helio, on the specification. Chris and Helio, I have a couple of slides which are just going through what we did, what's expected in this meeting, and where the specs are. Would you like me to run through those slides for the audience, or do you want to run through that material yourself before editing?
You can actually run it, so you are the author of the slides.
Okay. That's right, I read them. Only I know what's really going on, Helio. I've got the secrets. Okay, so the last meeting was busy. We basically um, revised and added to the spec. We included remediation and mitigation into the spec in appropriate sections. We ensured that they were included in the definitions, and we also worked on the get customer requirement. All of this was done around the security assurance spec, and all of this particular material that we focused on was security assurance focused. This means that what we did on the last call was very useful, productive, covered a lot of ground, though it was scoped to security alone. On this call, the basic idea is that we have a look at two issues related to security and two issues related to licensing, if time permits. With security, it seems the comments on the known vulnerability in the spec is one item to do, and another is to add program objectives. In licensing, potentially adding a definition of bill of materials and moving an access item to be part of compliance artifact delivery. Now, those are very short comments that may or may not make easy sense to you. And I'm just putting in the chat the links to the relevant sections. Basically, if you click those, you'll see on GitHub the actual issue and the specifics I just mentioned. If you need to get a copy of the existing licensing spec and the security spec, here you go. These are, ooh, those links didn't work properly in the copy paste. These documents are the documents that are the draft versions of licensing and security. Let me try again to send you licensing. Nope, it just doesn't like the copy paste going through here. I'm afraid that the slightly clunky Zoom copy paste is preventing a clean way to get you these links, but I'm going to try a revised method now. One moment. My goodness. Nope. Okay.
Shane, did you want me to show them any of those issues in more detail on this?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Be a good
So
idea.
with the links I just posted, I finally got a working version of the license spec and security spec links into the Zoom chat. You've got them there. And so you don't have to scroll. I'm posting the items we're going to cover today. What I'll do now is I'll hand over to Chris and Helio to actually open the issues, share their screens, and talk it through. So over to you guys on how you want to work on this stuff.
Chris, you edit or me, or will be me?
You can both share your screens, so it's a case of first first past the post, I think.
Yeah, it's
Nope, Chris has got it. He wins gold prize.
Okay, this is the spec in whole here that we were addressing last week in the last meeting. And this is the improvement item number 2 that Shane was just showing a few minutes ago, where we added the definitions here in 2.6 and 2.7 that talk about remediation and mitigation. So we've added this definition here to 2.7, and then we went down further in the spec to section 3.3.2 under assurance, and we added some text in there to talk about mitigation and okay, where did that go? There it is. So 2.7. Oh, I lost my track on this one.
so the last is the proposal definitions is there. That's the end of the.
Okay, I'm having a hard time hearing. There seems to be a lot of feedback on my end of the internet today. And so the voices are echoing to where it's hard to understand what you're saying.
Is my voice more clear, or is that better for you, Chris?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
So that was issue number 2, where we added both 2.6 and 2.7 in the definition section to cover both of those. And then in improvement 3 here, under the component category, we added the requirements. And let's see here.
Is there any chance you could make your the text bigger? I'm finding it quite difficult to read on the Zoom share.
No, I didn't copy that. Sorry.
So is there a way to increase the size of the text? It's a little difficult to read because it's quite compact. On the Zoom window, we're seeing the text, but also a very large desktop, so it's hard to see the details.
You would have to share differently, I guess. Instead of sharing the screen, sharing the particular window would do the trick probably. But we can also follow on the website, because this is just not just presenting the website, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
If you jump into the repository, you can easily follow this.
All right. Shane, I'm not up with how you're sharing this stuff that way. Do you want to do it? Helio, do you want to do it? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can do it. It's no problem. Yeah. Just a second.
Okay, you've got the share whenever you want it.
Yeah, okay, so
Thank you, Chris.
share screen now. Yeah, wait. When participants share some documents.
While Halio is getting that ready, Chris, we did cover a lot of ground in the last call. I think it was quite good, all the stuff we closed off there. It seemed to polish pretty much all of the major rough edges we'd seen on the spec. There's more comments to cover, but it seemed like we covered some of the key things.
Second, my Mac need to be allowed to share the screen. Corporate machines, we love that.
Most likely, then you will have to reconnect.
Yeah, just a second.
Halio's just dialing out and back in to get his updated permissions for screen sharing.
Hey, Shane, while he is working on it, I just have a very quick question regarding the SPTX update that you provided. That was delayed. Any idea when it got fact is that going to be ISO certified as well? Because I believe the current version that's ISO certified is the 2.2.1, right? Or the 2.2. Kind of curious, is that whether we got ISO certification, the 2.3, or is that going to be
a good question?
Yeah.
So my understanding is that SPDX 3 will go into the ISO process, but we're unlikely to see it start going through the process until around the middle of this year, which from my understanding means that graduation would be probably very late this year or more likely early next year. But I'm going to have to ask them for a more precise timeline once they've merged their documents and are ready to submit. because they still have to merge a few items.
There we go. Now you can see it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, works perfectly.
Okay, so where are we on the issues? Okay, which one is the last one that we are in? It's number 7, right, Chain? Chain?
Chris was doing a recap of the existing materials, and I think that meant we were looking at some closed issues, pulling up what we were going through on the closed issues. And Chris, correct me if I'm wrong. We were going through.
Yes, remediate and mitigate that one.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
2, 3, and 4.
Okay, so it's big enough for everyone. Should I?
Looks good.
Okay. There we go. So we are in the discussion about what is made at last time. On the addition, and the discussion is about to enter and add the specific terms of remediate and mitigate that is been added to the spec. Yeah. So you can see there's in the specification that it's derived from the 1.1 there and is added in the draft. The draft is on. Let's see how it is the mitigation there parts. 2.0 draft here. And remediate and mitigate is added on the draft there. So this is related for the latest part. So this is one of the tickets. It was discussed last time. Second one was the
Number 3.
by 3, yes, but it's the competence and category there.
Right.
Yeah, you can comment that on Chris, and I just holding out with you. Well, I think Chris is really hard to see. So you're going there. So
The new definition of remediate is, I mean, if I see 2.7 before and after, I think there's a little change, because before I was able to remediate by just skipping a part of the code, but here now it requires me to rewrite it. Am I too narrow here, or?
Yeah, no, I think it's you pretty much correct there. If you remember the old language and the new language there, here. Look at this, how this is changed. So this is basically, yes, you are correct on your assumption how it's done. It's very, very small details there. It says like here, the continuous and repeated parts, security testing there. And the method to verify, identify the risk, the name was different there. So the language changed for this. And that's the rationale below there. This is all Shane. Yeah, no, but in the end of, so if you look at, let's go back to the mitigation one.
The next one, yeah.
There we go. So we mark here. So this is actually the official one and the current draft.
So Jan, the mitigate definition would seem to allow what you want to do, which is not just rewrite, but maybe isolate, prevent access, or work around, or avoid.
Yeah, but given, for example, I remove the code, which is vulnerable. For example, saying we have a dependency tree in a transient dependency, a transitive dependency, we have this vulnerability, and I just cut it off because it's part of the code that I'm not using. Is this? I I wouldn't have thought this to be under rewrite the code because I just skip code.
But that enters in the definition there. So you know it's a workaround or avoid functionality that contains a vulnerability. It's not about rewrite.
Yeah, but I remediated it.
Yeah. No, you mitigated. That's the point. If you are in production there.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
you remediated that. Okay, now it's already starting to become confused again then.
sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. But yeah, we're remediating what eliminated or remove it. Yes, that's correct. Mitigation is a workaround that you need that you cannot remove it. That's correct. Yes, that is.
So this is Jeff here. I have a question. I think that's related to this. There's two cases which come to mind that I think there's a lot of discussion, whether it's Vex or other vulnerability feedback loops. So for example, like first case, say there's a CVE reported, and it only affects a certain operating system. Like zlib might have a vulnerability that only affects AIX, and I'm running under Linux, so I'm not affected by this vulnerability. There's no action I have to take. It's just my use is not vulnerable to that CVE. So in the current 2.x here, would that be mitigation, or should we explicitly call out the case where there's a vulnerability reported, but you are not affected you're not affected by it? There's no action that you're taking, but you're still not affected by the vulnerability.
Yeah, but the point is that the vulnerability applies to you. No, so this is actually not a vulnerability that you don't have a vulnerability.
But there's gonna be this case. I think there's a lot of discussion around this year, which is, people are gonna say you have a CVE. You have this version of zlib. There's a CVE, and you're following the OpenChain security specification. What number? What section of the OpenChain security specification did you do in order to say you're not affected by this vulnerability? And it's a case where you're just not, the vulnerability is not active because you're not using that operating system, for example.
You're raising an interesting point. That actually makes sense. This is something that should be clear there, because even if vulnerability exists, and you need to say that is applied to the current situation that we're using, being an operational system or similar thing. It's like the using Linux on the Linux in the ARM processor that's not affected by Heartbleed that happens on only x86 processors. So it's make completely sense, and based on what we have here, it's clear that it's all or nothing.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to make a point here. I think it's a very valid, very interesting question. I think we need to look at what you're basically referring to is the scope of impact. So when you look at the organizational release distribution, if you will, of all your third-party dependencies, a specific CVE or a vulnerability, your underlying process that is based on the spec should have how do I call it, like a bad news feature that should essentially be able to derive your scope of impact based on a given CPU. I think that probably the scope of usage is something that maybe we should probably take a note or maybe add as part of the spec.
I think the specification in the current state is quite fine to deal with such a case. We have in 3.3.2 a couple of requirements, which is for each identified known vulnerability, assign a risk and impact score, and for each detection and assigned score, determine the document necessary remediation and mitigation steps. And here in these two steps, I think we would handle the information that we say, hey, look, it doesn't fit, so the score is 0 for us, and then we can stop at this point.
Okay,
But
so
you're
as part of
right,
the remediation,
could-
remediation step, you are assessing the scope of that. You're saying.
it's in the third line here, in 332.
Right.
Yeah, for each identified known vulnerability, we would assign a risk and impact score. And if we see, as Jeff just mentioned, we are not affected because we are on the on another operating environment or whatever kind of situation we face, we would then say, okay, we have a score of 0, so there's no action required. However, and this is, I think, a very important idea here, the step 4 is just requesting the documentation. But if we take into consideration the idea of VEX, it would probably be more important to add here that we are also communicating or preparing to communicate our decision. Did I get
Right,
your
but
thought
then,
right?
but then the score, how does it make a difference? That, okay, if the score is 0, then obviously there is no scope of impact. But let's say, how do we make a distinction between a score of, let's say, a 2 versus 10, right? I mean, in the sense, if the risk is a lot greater, does that require the corresponding actions, or what are the consequent actions that we need to take? Is that also going to be covered, or is there something that we probably, again, leave it to the individual processes or automation to handle that?
And introduce this kind of language of a very explicit separation from one side and another. It can create a very dangerous situation there, because yes, let's say that it's okay to add that this certain exclusions for specific situations where the platform or the software or whatever related is not impacted for this specific vulnerability. But the way that you can write this, could you open up a huge breach at the point that we can use in this? Oh, but look this. Nowhere it says that my platform is vulnerable there. There's no explicit things, and it says here that we can ignore this vulnerability because this or that. If this is the way that you write these things, it's wrong. But look at this in the practical sense of why. And if you use it, let's use it again, and a good example, even AIX, but let's say that you're using Linux, and most of us are using Linux distributions in general there. When you apply a vulnerability to a software, the Linux distribution usually will update the software for every single architecture, because the cost is too higher to keep different versions there. So it's really sensible that vulnerability is existent there, and then you can add it later an exception for not applicable for this. But the text on 2.8 and 2.x, it's probably correct on that. You need to identify. So how actually you should do it in this case? We need to identify the vulnerability. You need to declare the vulnerability, document this once, and then explain why it's not applicable for there. But at least we need to say that this is, we not need to do it anything because the situation, but not need to be in the texts there. I think this is mostly in depth to put inside the text on this one.
Not sure whether I got it. You mean that the version how it's then on the 2.6 that this should be amended or not? Or,
I think that we should amend it at the point that we need to document the vulnerability and then put in the reason why it's not applicable for the situation.
Exactly. Yeah. And probably even, and this is, I think, the important part, probably, Jeff, am I right? That we add that we expose this information to the users or whomever is interested in this in case.
I think we have to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because I think that's just going to be the nature of vulnerability, open source vulnerability management going forward. Is
Sure.
all the scanners are going to give lists of CVEs. All the development teams are going to find, 40% of them don't affect the application, and we're going to have a battle, between people using scanner, customers using scanners, and the people making software, and the I don't want to fix it because it's not a real vulnerability battle. I think that needs to be explicitly disclosed in our document here if we're going to take apart. And I think 2.8 does pertain to that. We say, that last sentence, the vulnerability continues to exist but is contained. I might feel a little better if we're a little more specific to say that, that there might be no actions taken in 2.8 somehow, just to be specific. You might take an affirmative action to mitigate the vulnerability, or, due to the nature of your configuration, you're not affected by the vulnerability, but you have to explain to the end user why you think you're not vulnerable.
And that is one of the outputs of the 2.8 mitigation. You're mitigating the risk because your application is not susceptible to this vulnerability because it's being used in this type of manner or that type of manner, or that part of the code is not accessed by your application. I mean, there's a number of different reasons why you can mitigate it to where you don't feel that you have any action to take, and that's a good mitigation as long as you can support it and your end user.
Yeah, I think that not doing anything is might be an additional strategy. Yeah, that we also could outline here to just complete the scope. But I think the important thing really is that we make sure that we have a situation or clarify the requirement that we communicate the decision that we've have taken. For example, in 3.3.2, the step 4, we require for each detection and assigned score, determine and document necessary remediation or mitigation steps suitable for the use case of the software. And here, we could be a bit more specific and include this sort of publication requirement in case somebody is using this software.
I would say that in between 2.6 and 2.7, we added another entry called applicability. And then we can explain about this exactly situation about this. If this is not applicable for the current situation, that we need to disclose the vulnerability, but put in a statement about the not applicability of this vulnerability on your page. So people know the vulnerability exists, but we stop there because you don't need to remediate, you don't need to mitigate because there's nothing to do there.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree. Between 2.6 and 2.7, there's a triage step, an applicability. First thing you're going to do is affected, and what do we have to do? We're going to, that's that decision point. Do we remediate? Do we mitigate?
Yeah. It makes, it's changing the decision tree and the points. So and then actually would solve the fight between the developers of the two lanes and everything. They created a set of rules that when the situations can rule that when the situation is applicable, it simply overrule the other parts. That thing they understand. Yeah. Okay. So should we go into 2.6.1 or you move it 2.7, 2.8, 2.9 below, and another in the middle.
I think it doesn't matter where we add it because it's just a definition, and this is all only definitions. It's important to understand where we add it or where we refer to it in our 3.3.2 version where we have the process described.
Yeah, so we need to make it together. 3.3.2. There we go.
Yeah. It's I think here we have the requirements for this particular security assurance step. And from my point of view, it makes sense to have this triage decision, which is covered in step 4, I think. 4 and 5 are actually this. No, it's not 3, 4. It's inside this bullet list of bullets. It's
Oh yeah. Okay.
3 is okay. I know is something, then I'm assessing it. 4 is I decide what to do, and depending on my decision, then I'm taking some action. So and here we could be a bit more specific about this alternative of not doing anything in case we feel not impacted. So actually here just being a bit more specific, yeah, I feel like. And then we could also probably add the publication of our decision in case it's relevant for third parties.
Okay, so how do we start there? Let's push on this, the tragedy. There's one thing at least everyone agrees here, right? It's about we need to disclose the vulnerability even if it's not applicable for your situation, correct?
Yeah. If you agree, then I could make a suggestion in a new ticket for
Yeah.
this section. Yeah.
Let's do it. New issue.
Because then we don't need to fine grain all these words here in this meeting.
Issues, no issue. Okay. Improvement suggestions. There we go. So triage and 3, 2 specific situations where vulnerability not applicable. So let's description. Please someone give to me. That's I can type. Chris.
Maybe something along Jeff here, maybe something along the lines of there should be a process to determine if a reported vulnerability affects.
Be a process. Slow down. Go ahead. There should be a process
to determine.
Yeah.
If a reported
Sorry,
vulnerability.
again? Sorry, you are cut down. Yeah.
If a reported vulnerability is, affects the open source component as used.
There is. That's contained down there in section 332. That's security assurance's job.
Yeah. Okay, affects the component usage because it's not specific for open source, but in general for you can be operational system other parts of the component itself. So
Yeah.
okay, additional additional context. I would say that behavior. Oops. Is not present. Platforms, libraries. Okay, let's see. Can we add another one? Any more behaviors that we can push?
There's a case in CVE reporting where CVEs are disputed. And so there's no action for you. Like I think there's a classic CVE for maybe Java Mail where there's no ability to exploit. It's just a wrong, they should have never given a CVE to that component. And so it's disputed, so there's no action for the user. There's no actual risk.
Let's put an exclamation point because should discuss it. It's maybe the report is right, maybe the report is wrong. It stays on the limbo, so it's okay to us not take action. But are we sure that it's a bogus? That's a good question. Then
And
maybe there's.
I'll put in the chat a CVE that is disputed. That comes up a lot, which is the Java Mail CVE.
Yeah, I cannot see the chat. I can. Yeah. Okay. Yep. I think I know this one. Okay, so let's do one differently. So presume no action need be taken by user. And let's do it. Let's copy the CVE as the example. So this. Oops, too much. Why is not copying? Shane, what you made it soon? It's not copying the.
I can read you the CV. If you want to type, I can read you the CVE.
No. Yeah, just now I can get it. It's Zoom that's not allowed to copy and paste. Don't know.
Yeah, I was just about to defend myself and say that while I have a few talents, I don't have the talent to secretly buy all of Zoom's stock.
So okay, let's put CVE 2005. This is really old one. Yeah. So okay, let's see. Yes, correct. Okay. So any more additional context on this one? So no, take care of no. So expected behavior, no user action needed.
Should we document the reasons and the evidence why we don't believe that this vulnerability affects our usage?
I think so. Let's put in a described part. There's reason behind this. So, Jeff, go ahead.
Oh, 1 second. I've lost my. I'm so reasons beside this. So we should, document the evidence and research done by the.
This the reason,
Security,
or this
security, user to.
is. Wait. Document the evidence and.
Document the evidence and research performed in order to make this determination.
Determination.
Yes.
Okay. But this is the reason behind this. No, this is causality. It's different thing. This is cool. This is here. Expected behavior. It's on remediation and mitigation. And what exactly is the section 332, correct? This is you put in this indirect link. I will put this later. So if this section. 3, 3, 2. Okay, this is 2. Okay. And the reason behind this is like, okay, let's not put in the reasons, but put in the, how could I say, not example, usage example, or use event example. Library affects a specific operational system. Yeah, Linux, but not affect similar Unix systems. Okay, we have one event example for the widers.
And a second one, if we want to give another example, is disputed vulnerability.
Oh, this one is already below here, no? It's additional context. We are putting this, and we're putting this in the, so this is not additional context. This is why we are doing this. But okay, let's put in this directly on the additional context. And then we keep this on the simple here on top. Okay, so we do have this. And we have the oh, sorry.
We change operational system to operating system.
Operating system.
Library effect. Let's change that to library effects with an S.
Okay.
And then specific, change operational to operating.
Operating. Okay. Thank you. Oh, good. I'm not an English native speaker. Yeah. So expected behavior is there, and screenshots. Not. We don't need it. We don't have screenshots for the situation. And additional context for the expected behavior. It's already there. We don't need. So basically, I think the issue is okay. We need to write and let's do a review on this one. Let's assign B. Increase. Think it's okay. Should do something there. One, 2, 3, silence. So submit new issue. There we go. And we can go back to the documents. And the issues itself. We still have 5 minutes. We are getting longer with the discussion. So should we go to the next one? Just open, just, yeah.
Was 4.
Sorry, 4. The closed or the open? Yeah. You mean this one? The references for ILC. This one you mean? Yeah. Okay. So references to ISO standards. I think this is a no-brainer decision. It's okay. It's should be about mentioning there. Stefan already said that's no objection about this. So should we actually change anything on top of this, or should it is okay for that one?
I think that one's okay. I'd be curious about a couple of the items just putting in the chat that we didn't get a chance to go over this meeting.
Yeah.
These ones. I'd be curious because of what we just talked about now to maybe very quickly, we're on security, so maybe just to very quickly look at the known vulnerability issue 19.
19. Let's go into this. Yep. Let's go into this and put the 19 directly. It's open. Okay. Content no vulnerability security issues. Yeah. Okay. Let's read it just to make it clear for everyone. So section 321 describes the process to respond to known vulnerability external inquiries that shall be maintained as shown below. So the 321 mention access, maintain a process to effectively respond to known vulnerability external inquiries. Publicly identify a means by which a third party can inquire about a known vulnerability with respect to a given software offering. So the opinion coming from Lynn that the response for one decisions. Therefore, I think the word receive is more suitable to be the first step to be used in Etsy. So you are referring to the cybersecurity part of Etsy there. And if you want to change it, the language on top of it typically that has below steps in handling vulnerability, many cybersecurity standards, which is, I think this is completely valid because they are our main target audience. So if it's making no sense to us write anything that doesn't speak the same language of our target audience. The question is how to fit this properly on the document.
Chris, do you have any insight into how we might address this?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I couldn't make out what he was saying.
Yeah, I'm struggling on the details of it myself.
So the connection is not good enough.
The question is, does it start to go into the how? I mean, here we have the 3.2.1 is part of the 3.2 section that is actually pushing requirements on what we require to maintain an overall security handling. And there we require that known vulnerabilities shall have a way to enter the system from the outside. So if I'm correct in this position here. And he's referring to the coordinated vulnerability disclosure procedure and requests that we add something like this at this position. Am I right? This is what I understand from this.
This is where I'm struggling a tiny bit to understand what SC meant. I am struggling a bit. I mean, my read, and this is where I could be completely wrong, was that we're saying that in this section access, there's a process to effectively respond to external inquiries. And he thinks that receive should be the first step, not respond. And then you can evaluate whether to respond.
I think that it's not enough in the point of hits is mentioning there. So usually this doesn't have time attached of his answer, but you need to think about timing on this. So we say in 3.1 that we need to maintain a process. Okay, that's completely correct there. And public identify a means by which the party can inquiry a vulnerability. We say the both extremes, left and right. But if you're looking for his assessment there, between 0.1 and 0.5, this happens completely in a private area. So security, the people cannot simply show the vulnerability way before we mitigate it or prepare it. This is how it works on the security circles. So it means that we are saying that as long that we have the vulnerability, we need to publicly identify. It could be understood that if you're holding the vulnerability with us before it fixes, we are violating the complete spec, because we already know the vulnerability and we are not publicly identifying it. So he want to make it more clear that these steps are following and when actually to do it.
But then we are really moving into the how, because here, so far we say, we require a meme to contact us, to make something known to us that has been found by a third party. And then we, in 3.2.1.2, an internal document procedure exists for responding to third-party known vulnerability or newly discovered vulnerability inquiries. So meaning we are doing something about it, whatever we do, and we respond. And if this is there, and then we are fine out. So the question is, should we go into that detail, saying, okay, this procedure must be also contain this step and that step and handle this and that? Or, I mean, in general, you treat this stuff the same way you treat the ones that you find, and then that would be probably it's too vague, but
okay, maybe not going in that way, but you just should tweak a little bit to want to say that when we need to publicly identify it. So we just say that it should be public in the moment that is mitigated or a solution is therefore
This is
found.
something Stephen brought up something in the comments as well that might help us, which is just saying that Jan hit the nail on the head that it's moving into how. Maybe we're reading the word respond with too much fidelity, because we're not talking about the mechanism, as Stephen pointed out, we're talking about the process. So saying effectively respond as a process could be a process that chooses the effective response is not to respond to the third party actor, but to have internal activities and so on. So it's about how the company responds. It's not about the communication with the actor per se. Would that be a fair reading, Stephen?
I would
And I was
ask
going to say that the publicly identify is talking about just an interface by which somebody can raise something externally. It's not talking about publication of material.
Yeah, it's correct. Steven, I will ask it if you can add it later on this issue. Your comment would be nice to keep us tracking, or I can do it, but I prefer that you do it.
Yeah, I'll do it now.
Okay, just I can really understand what the point of view of Slin about this one, but this how to fit in the language. He made a good point in general. I think that he made a good point. Of course, we're not detailing the processes there, but he really worried about it. He really worried about the fact that we're writing that if you have a vulnerability, you should disclose and not say then why, not following a proper process there. So we should say at some point that you have to follow the proper company process or defined process, and to allow it to be public identified at some point. So we're not getting in the how parts, but we actually say that's the need to have a process. That's a new need to have a process to public identify the inquiries there. So maybe this could help, right?
Yep, absolutely. And Chris just added that maybe this should be about establishing two-way communication to receive input about vulnerability as well as responding. Okay, sounds like we need to add this stuff to the GitHub. We need to come back to it on the next call.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, okay. That was interesting how the mitigate and remediate topics become so intense on the last two meetings.
Yep, Mary, you're absolutely right.
Okay, you over the time already, right?
We're over the time, so we'll have to come back to this on the next call.
Yeah, I would suggest that we can extend some comments on before the next call to actually make this more concrete, so you avoid to actually go too much in the discussions.
What I'll do, Chris and Mary, is I'll just add your comments to the GitHub as part of the post-call stuff, and maybe Helio, you and Chris can coordinate on a very short briefing email to the team to let everyone know what we went over today.
Yep, of course. So
Thank
stop sharing now. It's up to you,
All
Christian.
right.
Back to you, Jim.
Thank you very much, Helio. Thank you both, Helio and Chris, for leading the discussion on this, and thank you for everyone present. We are wrapping up now for today. We're going to move into the quieter period of our afternoons. If there's any other business, please do let me know. And if there is no other business, we shall just move directly to close of meeting. I'll see you all on the next one in 2 weeks, if you're good for US and Asia, or in 4 weeks, if you're good for North America and Europe. Take care, be well, be safe, be healthy.
Thank you, Shane.
Thank you, everyone.